And we are live. It is the Audible Live, counting down the best landing spots in the 2022 NFL Draft. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund, Matt Waldman. And why did Breece Hall land in the right spot, Sigmund?
Well, because he's going to get all that early down opportunity, and he's a good fit for the Jets' running game. The draft capital they gave up. This is kind of a similar situation to Javonte Williams, right, where there was a lot of expectation that the Texans were going to take Breece Hall, and the Jets get him one pick ahead of the Texans pick. It was Miami, of course, with Javonte Williams, and Denver moving up. We all see what that's done for Javonte Williams. Dynasty value still going up, even with Melvin Gordon coming back. I still think he's a hot commodity that's going to hold value the same way that Breece Hall will. The only real about Breece Hall is that he landed on a team with a good passing down back, a good receiving back. So that takes a little bit of upside off. But at the same time, guys, we can look at where these rookies landed. There is no ideal rookie landing spot, right? It's quality of offense, other players. There's always going to be something that we can use to detract them, and it's going to still come down to the player and how they perform.
Down to the player, how they perform, and how it's Hall going to do with the Jets, man.
Yeah, I think I think in theory it's a great landing spot in terms of his talent and what they would like to be able to do with the system. I mean, he fits the wide zone system just fine. He's a good downhill runner in terms of being able to make cuts and cutbacks. But I would say overall, the biggest question is Zach Wilson. Is he, Zach Wilson couldn't get Elijah Moore where Elijah Moore needed to be last year, and Joe Flacco did. So can he take that next step? And be, the catalyst in this offense to make everything hum. And if he does, then Breece Hall is going to be just fine. But I'd say, if there's a player that fits really well in an offense who elevated up my board at the running back position, it's James Cook in Buffalo. Because to me, they're going to give him that opportunity to be, Austin Eckler-like, or maybe even Marshall Faulk-like if they spread the field enough. And that offense really goes great, but I don't think it's going to, it's not going to be that high of a spectrum for him. But the fact that they're going to move him around as a weapon, and he's a good inside runner. He just isn't a high volume inside runner. And what they have in that backfield isn't exactly like inspiring in Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. So Cook has a real opportunity to shine in a Bills offense where they also probably need another slot guy or another inside guy that they can use with Cody Beasley gone. Certainly they have the veteran Jamison Crowder, but he's getting old. And then you have McKenzie, who, was kind of flamed out in Denver and, looks like he's showing some good work, but Cook offers more as a runner and a dangerous weapon you can move around.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that because it's another piece, right? And not only is Cody Beasley gone, but Cole Beasley's gone too, and so is Mrs. Beasley. Mrs. Beasley's gone as well. So there you go for all of us old guys out there. I will say that James Cook landing spot bloom is probably my favorite, as Matt highlights, because Buffalo's offense is so high powered, and it's the perfect fit of he goes earlier than some people thought he would go, but he also goes to the right team to be utilized the right way. And there's also the thought, I tend to battle against it, perhaps we can debate it, of running backs, they can't stand up the way that they used to. Well, Cook's maybe not the largest guy to be able to do that. Hall, I would say the opposite. I was like, give him everything, even though Michael Carter's there. But I really love the Cook landing spot bloom.
Yeah, and I think that this is a great place to take advantage of the Dynasty fantasy community fading Cook a little bit, because I think that this is a forest trees thing where he landed in a good organization, a team that wanted not just him, but a player with his skill set. Because really this starts with J.D. McKissic changing his mind, right? If J.D. McKissic signs with Buffalo, this pick never happens. But with Cook, they get someone who can do even more than McKissick. You have Devin Singletary. Remember, it's always temporary. You should always be looking 2-3 years down the line when projecting these situations. Don't get too hung up on this year in dynasty leagues and rookie drafts. And he's in a great offense. He's in an offense that's going to maximize the talents in the offense. So Austin Eckler's brought up. I mean, let's even bring up Alvin Kamara. And I'm not saying he's going to turn into Eckler or Kamara, but the idea being that when a team takes one of these backs, or in Eckler's case, signs one of these backs, and what they have to offer at first is passing down skills, passing game skills, that can get their foot in the door to show they can do more on early downs. And this isn't exactly an offense that needs a 230-pound back on early downs. That's not how they manipulate the defense into creating the running situations that they want. So Cook could easily look, guys. It's in with the range of outcomes for Cook to be more valuable than Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall 2 or 3 years down the line. But nobody's drafting him that way. You can get him at the end of the first round, early second round, and I think that if you're lucky, you're going to see the most important part of this is the alignment between the priorities and the talent and the quality of the offense.
It was the best possible fit.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I was one of those people. My best friend's a Bills fan. Anybody who's watched this show long enough knows that.
Yeah.
He's like, what kind of back do we want? I was like, you get you a big one. And they didn't do that because they were nosing around Breece Hall. Is that correct? Am I misremembering that? My brain is mush. I can't imagine your brain, Matt. Your brain is much larger than mine and much better than mine. But
I don't know about that.
After the draft, people asked me something. I was like, I don't know. I'm still like, give me like a month, okay? In June, I'll be able to acknowledge stuff. But right now, I'm just like, I don't know. But I think they were interested in Breece before the draft. I had told my Biggie, like, watch out for Hall. He'd be good. So when they got Cook, he's texting me like, what did they do? And I was like, actually, pretty okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's the interesting thing about Cook's game is he's not as dynamic as, say, Chris Johnson used to be when he was with the Titans, where he would run it inside and have that great contact balance for a smaller, faster back. But he has Chris Johnson's vision and decision-making and ability to change direction in a very efficient manner. So you can run him inside and get the tough yards because he's going to find those tight creases and avoid penetration. Now, you're not going to run him inside the number of times you would run a big back, but you're going to be able to use him in those situations. And that's important because then it makes it more believable to the defense when they do use play action or when they use him as an outlet after they fake the ball to him into the line. So Cook is good not only there, but then you can split him outside and run routes as a receiving weapon and not just a flat route or outlet running back. And that's the thing that the Bills talked about.
That's
too.
What Singletary is. Singletary's an outlet guy, but not a route runner.
Not at all. So Cook gives you that dynamic where he can make, it's easy to start inside and break outside for a running back. That's a general route that you usually see. But it's harder to be a route runner who works on the outside and works to the inside of the field and has to catch the ball in the numbers. And James Cook's a very tough runner or a very tough receiver at the catch point where he can take some contact or make plays in tight creases in breaking into the middle of the field. So for me, he's going to be my number 3 back on the post-draft board for the RSP and elevated the most of any of the backs. Because this was the perfect fit for him. There was pretty much no other place that I think I could have elevated him for him as a landing spot other than maybe the Cardinals, if in theory their coach actually ran an offense that people expected him to run. But Kingsbury hasn't shown what everyone has clamored for him to be. So Cook is a great fit here.
The Audible Live continues here. Cecil Lammey, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, and let's talk Bloom. Matt, I don't know. This is going to be difficult. I don't know if Matt's going to make fun of us or what.
Okay.
But let's talk Kenny Pickett.
He never
here.
does.
Let's talk.
That's
Kenny
okay.
Pickett.
He can.
Okay, and I see you in the chat room talking about Kenny Pickett with our people. We love our people here on the Audible and here on our Football Guys channel. But Pickett, the NFL spoke what it thought on quarterbacks. And by the way, Skylar Thompson with the Dolphins, Matt.
Yeah.
Very, very tasty. Very tasty.
Yeah.
So let's talk Kenny Pickett.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, the very short way to answer this for fantasy is don't bother with him. I mean, don't bother with him at ADP. Not in a super flex league, not in a one quarterback league. His upside's going to be modest. And, the football conversation is much more interesting than the fantasy conversation here with Pickett. The Steelers, the glass half full take as a Steelers fan and as a football analyst is the Steelers accepted their trajectory as a franchise, that they're not going to be picking in the top 10. They're not going to be trading up into the top 10. They're not going to be getting a franchise quarterback. And the nature of this class, which revealed itself to be even lower in the eyes of the NFL than we thought, gave them an opportunity to add a quarterback that they see as their long-term guy. And look, the Steelers' cap situations, some of this is just team building, right? I mean, guys, we can think of this as just a game, like a board game or a computer game. And here are the parameters. Right, like here are the parameters. You have this much money to build your team. And yes, it's going to expand X% each year. But the Steelers, you're not going to be, the Steelers aren't going to be doing something like trading for a Matthew Stafford or trading for a Tom Brady, or signing a Tom Brady, right? The last two Super Bowl winners. The Steelers don't have that option on the table. Or even trading for a Matt Ryan, So in this way, they accepted, and Kenny Pickett, as Matt Waldman has been reassuring, even though he also, it's great. We have to always keep that fun rivalry intact, that, he still has a limited ceiling, but he has a high enough floor that it can keep the team competitive. It'd be a magic trick if they can get into the playoffs this year with Kenny Pickett, but the idea being we're going to keep the team competitive. We're going to keep this thing going. But at the same time, guys, I'll leave it like this. Was Pickett going to go in the first round if the Steelers didn't take him? I don't think so. No. I don't think so.
No.
As a Steelers fan, as I was saying to our folks in the chat room that were asking, I would have rather seen Trent McDuffie there. I think Trent McDuffie was a good enough prospect that it's just a layup that you can get him at the 20th pick of this draft. I think he was one of the clear first-round quality guys. You saw Kansas up and snag him. And then in the second round, they could have had Coral or Willis or Ritter. George Pickens is nice, but George Pickens is a little bit of a luxury right now when this team is looking at right now. So I'm disappointed, but at the same time, Pickett's going to keep the team competitive, which I guess in the end is what most fans want.
Pickett's going to be Mitchell Trubisky. Maybe Derek Carr, Matt.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think we can look at the range this way. The low range or the mid range to me would be Derek Carr, at least prior to the past couple of years, where he's been better. And then I think the high range could be Kirk Cousins. If you get enough talent around him that really matures, I think he can give you that Cousins-like play. Where as a Browns fan, if I'm going to joke about it before I get serious, is that it'll give you guys enough kind of indigestion about whether or not you really want to sign him to that second deal. Is he really a franchise quarterback or is he not? But he's my number one quarterback on the post-draft board. And while I don't have him as a first-round player, and to me, I look at this quarterback class as a whole and say, other than Matt Corral, I would say the rest of these guys, just wait till you can get a late round guy, someone in the 7th or who came in the 7th round or as a UDFA. I'm more intrigued by Skylar Thompson and Carson Strong than most of these quarterbacks, and would rather just wait till the end and just say, this is not the year you draft a quarterback. This is the year you load up on wide receiver and running back. And if you're going to take and if you're going to take a chance on a quarterback in fantasy, maybe you take the safe pick with Pickett in a one quarterback league. If he falls to you, into the late second or early third, maybe Matt Corral, because I actually think if you're going to look at the way quarterbacks do their best work, Corral may not have the offense that makes it look like that has that CYA mentality of how you pick players, but I think he has the least skills that you have to like untie and then rebuild. And
he's the best modern day quarterback for what this league asks of you as a passer.
I would
he's
agree.
better than Willis in that category, even though Willis has a much stronger arm and is a much better athlete. Corral's a good athlete, but he manipulates. I think it's working in chaos. Matt, is that a good way to put it?
He uses his skills best in chaos of any of the quarterbacks that are the name brands at the top of the board. And so for me, if you're going to take a chance in a 2-quarterback league, Pickett, Corral, and Willis are fine, though I think you would rather have them fall to you than make it a priority. And then otherwise I would just go late with Thompson and Strong, knowing that likely they're not going to do anything for you. But if you pick them late, they're free. They're free in most drafts. They're not being drafted at all. So take the chance after you've loaded up on these other positions. And if you don't hit on them, that's fine. There's a bigger chance that you've built surplus with running backs and wide receivers and trade for the quarterback you want.
Can I interject for a second?
Go for it.
And ask Matt a question. And I'm going to piggyback on what Matt was saying about Corral. And really, I'm talking to the Superflex players out there, because in 1-quarterback leagues, just punt quarterback. I mean, like Matt said, maybe take Kenny Pickett in the early 3rd round. And that's more because, well, geez, you're going to look at what's there at running back, tight end, and wide receiver and think, that's not great either. So it isn't like the opportunity cost of taking Pickett at the 28th pick of your rookie draft or something like that is that great. Now, Coral, I just want to add in a postscript on Coral. Remember this. The Panthers gave up their first pick of the 3rd day, which is not insignificant because they did not have a pick on the 2nd day, and a 3rd round pick next year, which, if it goes like last year, is going to be an early 3rd round pick. So they were kind of desperate to get Coral. I mean, I think if you reverse engineer this psychologically, they're watching Coral fall down the board and saying, well, if we have to give up our first pick of the remaining draft and a 3rd round pick next year, that tells me they had Coral as a 2nd round player, and they had Coral as a player that they were probably burning up the phones to try to get. So the 3rd round draft capital on Coral, on Willis, on Ritter is going to kind of throw things off a bit, but we're going to see we're probably going to see all 3 of them start at some point, and and the draft capital is going to just disappear into the wind. And so for Superflex drafts, these guys turn into values because of the 3rd round capital. That is, if they're falling to the 2nd and 3rd round of your Superflex draft. But what I want to ask you, Matt, because you brought up Skylar Thompson, and this is, what this is going to be about. You're going to unpack this real fast, Matt. What are the chances? Is it Zappy? Zap's a great
Zappy. Yeah. Zappy.
What are the chances that a year or 2 from now he's ahead of Mac Jones?
Well, before you answer that, I want to add on to your point about Superflex and just say this, is that if you are good at trading in dynasty leagues, then go ahead and draft some of these quarterbacks in a Superflex dynasty league, because as we know, Malik Willis, Pickett, Howell, Ritter, whenever they get on the field, they're probably going to look good in the box score, just like Drew Lock did, just like Baker Mayfield did, just like, pretty much every quarter, Drew Biskey, Gardner Minshew. And there's odds are most of them are going to turn out like the players I just mentioned. So if you understand the dynamics of development and how defenses scout, which we talk about all the time here, which is, so if you understand that, then within the first 8 to 12 games, harvest the value of what you can get from that player, and then you can trade for more draft capital later, or a player that you need, and just look at it that way. And if you miss and they turn into a star, that's all right. They're low enough as they are where you drafted them that it's worth the value. And in terms of Bailey Zappi, I think Zappi is Mac Jones like in terms of his arm talent. I know that people talk about the velocity of his throwing at the Senior Bowl, but that whole mechanism was screwed up anyway. Zebra had to recalibrate their technology the year before, so I'm not really exactly trusting of that. And what you see on the field is that the arm still has some suspect aspects to it for him to be a desirable starter. He doesn't have Mac Jones' pocket presence. He's not remotely as good as Mac Jones as a pocket present player. But
he might be the exact opposite of Mac Jones in the pocket.
Yeah, if it's an unexpected pressure, he fails. If it's expected, he knows what to do. Exactly. So Zappe has the makings of being a decent backup. I would say he's, Brock Purdy's better in the pocket than Bailey Zappe. He's just not as consistent of a decision maker as Bailey Zappe is. If he was a better decision maker, I'd probably pop him over some of the guys that you mentioned, like Howell and Ritter, in terms of some of the things that he does. So it's again, quarterback is just quarterback this year. If you can harvest the value, great. If you're a draft and hold person and know that trading is not you just don't have league mates who are great to negotiate with, or you're just not good at it, pass on them.
I would say this. I'd be more excited about Zappe if McDaniels was still there. And let's say something very gently, Bloom. Very gently. We're going to tread lightly. Don't want any hurt feelings here. Bill Belichick's getting worse at drafting.
Oh, geez.
I mean, Tyquan Thornton, you took like a 6th round receiver who's a one-trick pony in the 2nd round. Did they move up for Tyquan? Like,
I don't think so.
I don't think they did.
Either way, but look, he just hasn't learned. You would have thought that he himself said, scouting professional receivers, understanding what's going to work in our offense if someone's already played in the pros is much easier than the college receivers.
And this is something that got Mike Shanahan in trouble, when at the end of his time with the Broncos, it's like, you can't do everything, man. Like, you just can't.
And the way they scouted was very telling when you listen to Robert May's Athletic podcast, and they had Dante Scarnecchia on. And one of the first things he said, well, how do you guys go about, what's your role in this? And he goes, well, at the end of the year, they have me look at the top guys at the All-Star game. I have my own form, which basically says we don't have a way we scout players. He has his own form. And then he's chastising, well, maybe not chastising, but he's telling other scouts all the time about how they shouldn't double dip on arm length. So they don't have a uniformity of how they even look at some of the players they look at. And then he hands what he has over to Josh McDaniels and Belichick for them to look at. So he's not looking at everybody either, because he only has so much time during the season. So if that's part of their scouting system, I'm glad that Bill Belichick's dad wrote a book and is very knowledgeable, and that Bill's a great football mind. But that kind of thing is an issue that just tells you it's a lot about how the NFL works with this. So, the fact that your teams keep making the same mistakes, you can get some insight into why. While some people will look at that podcast and go, there were some great nuggets of what they do. There were great nuggets about what they do. But that's also very telling if you understand about how you manage a process that was rife with issues. And that was also equally telling and kind of a hidden nugget in those types of, styles of, looks into what we do.
I just thought it was bad, Bloom.
Well, it was no. And look. I mean, since we're going down this road, I mean, guys, doesn't it just come back to the quarterback? I mean, this is why the Kenny Pickett pick over, say, taking Malik Willis or even a Desmond Ritter is kind of, because how far can you go in this version of the AFC with Mac Jones as your quarterback in the playoffs? Unless you have some sort.
The AFC is brutal. The AFC is absolutely killer, crusher. Like Mac Jones only, Kenny Pickett. You're hitting your head.
Right.
Because you don't have Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. You don't have Russell Wilson. You don't have Pat Mahomes. You're doing this in the AFC.
You didn't. Yeah, you didn't.
This is the West and the East back in the day, since you're wearing the NBA jersey, Bloom.
Yeah.
Like, this is the West and the East. It's like, well, you can run through the East all day long, but the West is killer. The AFC is brutal, man. Brutal.
And you didn't trade for A.J. Brown. You got Devontae Parker, who, yes, can be good when he leans on his God-given talent, but no, I mean, he's worked to get better, but he's not the reliable player that you would want to pair with Jones. I mean, Jones can be good enough if the team is good enough. This team isn't good enough.
Yeah, they're going to have to win with these little advantages on special teams They're going to have to create plays on defense. So it's just tough to see it's getting out of this mediocre zone. But I mean, again, that there's a lot of teams in the AFC that applies to. But and the Thornton pick, I think the other part of it too, is we're talking about Mac Jones, is you don't have the offense, the quarterback, to take advantage of his speed. You don't. I mean, you're not really going to be able. So, I mean, they'd almost be better off with Carson Wentz if they're just getting down to W's, if they're going to take advantage of somebody like Thornton. But we don't have CCs. We can't really enjoy the Patriots not being relevant because the Steelers are about to not be relevant too.
Yeah, there you go. Congrats. That's the way it goes in the National Football League. Now, we have to keep this somewhat brief, but I think it's very fascinating. You're the two that I can have this conversation with because we're the adults. The Matt Corral thing. Well, I mean, in our own minds. The Matt Corral thing, when the Party Boy stuff came out.
Right.
I actually, and I'll be totally honest. Except for his damn injuries, he was my number one quarterback this year. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a great quarterback class. But I really, 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 really appreciate Matt Corral. Corral, whatever. I'll say Corral because I'm from the country. Anyway.
Golden Corral.
Yes. The whole stuff, he's been through stuff. He fought, had problems with alcohol, problems with depression. I know at one point, Matt, he was hurt, and Plumlee came in at quarterback, took his job, and most guys would have transferred, right? I mean, hell, Malik Willis transferred from Auburn because of Jarrett Stidham.
Bo Nix.
I mean, seriously. So the fact that Corral stayed, got the job back, and has gone through something, the best people I know, and this is where Matt and I were driving to the Senior Bowl one time, and he goes, "You had some therapy, didn't you?" I was like, "Yeah." I go, "How can you tell?" He's like, "It's the way that you talk." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing."
No, it wasn't some new agey stuff.
Right. And I encourage everyone to get help, right? And to talk it out, whatever.
Yep.
But like for me, the best people I know in my life are people that went through stuff. Yep. The guys who are like Drew Lock. Hey, you're just the greatest. You're the great. Footwork's awful, and you're too arrogant. You're the greatest. That guy never works out. But the guy who had to fight, claw, scratch, bite, just drag himself and get to the point that he's at. And, he's a party boy. And I've had the conversation on this show, like, can party boy quarterbacks exist in today's NFL when quarterback is a lifestyle? It's not even a job. It's just who you are. I'm not saying Corral will be anything, but obviously I appreciate his skill. Matt and Sig, you do as well.
Yeah.
But I think the NFL was just a little too old school. And of course, April was awful. I think the draft has jumped the shark too, by the way. Not only is the Senior Bowl getting too touristy, but the draft's getting too stupid with this Chris Angel stuff and Ed Marinaro up there talking for 7 minutes. My buddy Mark went skiing with Marinaro like back in the 80s. He's like, he was chatty back then too.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, seriously, I think the NFL got a little too stodgy. And people tried to, kind of assassinate his character a little bit because, he had problems with depression. I'm like, no, that makes him better because he got through it.
Yeah. See, there's a point that went around, and it's not only is the draft an on-ramp to talk about any football topic, it's really an on-ramp to talk about any topic about humanity and human resources. That phrase kind of bothers me more and more the more I think about it. But see,
the most dangerous place in a corporate America,
right? Well, just the idea that you would call it human resources. They're just humans. It's just humans. If you treat it like a resource, well, we look around. Anyway, what do we do with our resources? We destroy them. We consume them. There was a lot of talk I saw, Cease, about how players are much more open about their mental health struggles now. And the old school NFL is like, hey, you think it's a badge of honor because you're depressed? I had to walk uphill barefoot to school in the snow both ways, And I think you're right that you're going to see all of these things are tests. And again, Matt Waldman's been walking us through this for years. All these things are tests of these organizations, of the people that run the organizations, of their willingness to be open-minded, of their willingness to adopt new ideas or listen to other people that disagree with them. And I think you're right that struggle creates us. and struggle. Now that being said, we don't know other people's struggles. And you might look at someone from the outside and say, you've never struggled, you've had everything handed to you, and that person might have struggles that we don't even know about. So I don't think we should assume from the outside that we know someone else's struggle. But you're absolutely right that struggle as part of your story and being honest and open about it, like you said, like y'all were talking about with therapy, is a change that the old school NFL organizations are not going to understand, and the more modern organizations probably are hopefully having those kind of discussions among themselves, right? I mean, who has the worst mental health? My wonderful wife, love of my life, Kate, seeing Sean McVay saying he needs a hobby or a friend or something. I mean, NFL head coaches wear it as a badge of honor that they never see their families, or So I think with Bruce Arians, like, hey, it's okay to have a life too. It's okay to be a human being and not just a football player.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Corral to me was of the big names was my top quarterback as well. And let's just look at this one. Let's go back a little old school. Tom Brady, he had to fight for his job at Michigan. He got demoted a couple of times during his career. Kurt Warner had to stock groceries in order to save his dream to be in the NFL. Brett Favre had, probably about a mile of intestine removed from him during his career, and had to be basically a circus sideshow for Jerry Glanville at the beginning of his career. Terry Bradshaw, his likeness was hung in effigy by Steelers fans early in his career and had been benched multiple times. Joe Montana, I don't think was exactly considered like the best Notre Dame quarterback that
Notre Dame
ever
when he
saw.
Started for the Fighting Irish. 8th string.
Yeah. So we can talk. John Elway, I remember going through rough times. So you can look at a number of quarterbacks and understand that the NFL still doesn't understand that there's a level of emotional confidence that you have to play that position, because you can know what to do, but can you do it at the right time? And so that's what made a guy like Chad Kelly so compelling, even though everything didn't work out for him, because as Cecil could attest, the guy was raring to go from the beginning, and he worked his tail off from the beginning. And then when he got on the field, he looked good, but he couldn't get along with others. Now, Matt Corral, I mean, you look at the situation, and these are just nuggets that people want to bring up because, again, it adds drama to what's going on, and it calls into question a number of, it calls into question about whether this guy's a good leader from people who don't ever interview people to discover whether they're good leaders or not. They just ask questions and then write the answers. And if the answer is juicy, the more compelling it is. They don't interpret the answer on an accurate level most of the time. Most journalists are very intelligent people, but most journalists don't have the experience to parse information on that level unless they have had maybe, multiple levels of training. So, I remember Teddy Bridgewater, the same thing. Teddy Bridgewater, we talked about it here, much to the delight of many folks, that, he was a guy that wasn't a great leader, but I remember getting access to those leadership tests that they do and talking about how he scored off the charts compared to everybody else on accountability and, maturity and all of the different things that you would expect. And he went through something where he nearly quit the team and went home and decided to stick it out, after things happened to him early on in his career. And, after what happened to him, in practice and nearly losing his leg, the fact that he's on his, how many, 7th or 8th team, it feels like at this point, and he'll probably have another 5-year career where he's on a series of 1-year contracts. That may not be good for fantasy, but the fact that he's actually still playing and that he's valued enough to be that guy that if Tua Tagovailoa fails or they don't like him, they've got Teddy to go in there and they feel like he can help run that team and keep them maybe in contention. And then the next team will want to do that, and the next team. That says a lot about a player. Considering that there's not many good enough to play quarterbacks to play in the NFL at this point, and Teddy's considered one of them, even if he's not considered a long-term starter. So yeah, this Corral stuff, you can feel free to ignore that. People who grow from experiences should have more value, place more value in people who've actually had to struggle and overcome it.
It is the Audible Live here. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman. And as we wrap up today's show on best rookie fits, Bloom, you got I want to bring up Trey McBride with Arizona.
Okay.
Because you were talking about Cliff earlier. But I want to leave the floor to you, gentlemen. And you and I are going to be doing our draft recap shows next week. So everyone stay tuned for that. We'll have 8 episodes of the Audible where Sigmund and I break down these rookie classes. But Sig, is there one player in particular that kind of jumps off to you as I just like where this kid landed?
I'm going to go deep, and I'll be interested to see what Matt Waldman says about this. Remember the name Abram Smith? File that one away. James Robinson. I mean, look, James Robinson is a unicorn, but consider this. Mark Ingram, well, he's Mark Ingram. We love Mark Ingram. He's at the end of his career. Tony Jones, nothing. I mean, what we saw from him, not much right there. Alvin Kamara, and this is one of those things that nobody is talking about in the larger context, but down here in Southeast Louisiana, guys, I was walking the street in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Once was the capital, kind of a sleepy, wonderful river town that used to be a lot more important than it is now. And there's these folks that had this amazing yard, like, one of those yards that has like 1,700 different things in it. It's like a little museum.
Yeah. And
they were sitting out on their porch, and I just said, "Hey, mind if I stop and take a look at your yard?" They're like, "Oh yeah, sure." And they asked me what I did, and I said, I covered football, I talk about football, write about football. And they said, "What's going to happen with Kamara?" What's going to happen with Kamara? Look, folks, Drew Davenport is doing an incredible job covering this stuff for us. He's not a sure thing to be available week 1. He's not a sure thing to be available for who knows. He's facing felony charges. There's supposedly a video. Okay. Abram Smith could easily be an important running back for the New Orleans Saints week 1. And this organization knows a thing or two about finding undrafted running backs. So this is a guy that I wish I'd put higher, and I'm going to probably make some changes to the post-draft 100 as the dust settles. I'm not smart like Matt Waldman and just manage expectations, say, hey, it's going to be a week, but I have to think about these things. So Abram Smith is a player that I think very quickly could get on our radar.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. Well, Abram Smith is such a good natural zone runner. It's like very rarely do I label somebody natural or instinctive, because especially at running back, because I rail against that whole idea of it being just like pure instinct and knowing how these guys work at it. But for someone who was a former linebacker, he took to the outside zone like a duck to water. And he's also, because he doesn't have a lot of bend in those 2 creaky knees, he still has that good movement in a way that, and the power and the burst, that he's good in gaps games too. So like you can use Mark Ingram on more zone plays. You can run Smith on more outside plays, outside zone, as well as some gap plays. So I like him. The other running back I like is Kennedy Brooks, because no one seems sold on Miles Sanders as like the answer. He's in the last year of his contract. Philly also has a strong offensive line, like the Saints have had a strong offensive line over the years. And listen, Kenneth Gainwell, I know a lot of people like him. I know that the Eagles want to use him more. They want to use Miles Sanders more. They probably wanted to use, I don't think the Eagles have a realistic understanding of who Kenneth Gainwell is if they're going to try and use him as an every down back. And Boston Scott's in his last year as well, and they just see him as a scat back. To me, probably the best pure runner on that team is Kennedy Brooks entering that team. He's not the fastest, but listen, they used Jordan Howard and felt okay with him, when they needed to supplement it. I think Kennedy Brooks has a real chance to make this team, and he has a real chance to contribute based on the way that he plays. He's a very smart runner. And when you have a team that, that has a good running quarterback, you have a strong offensive line, you get A.J. Brown, who's going to be able to enforce what happens over the middle as a receiver. Kennedy Brooks could be that guy who we look at and go, look at him just getting double after double after double, the occasional triple. And next thing you know, to me, as I've said pre-draft, if there was a player that I was going to take if I could go to Vegas and make the long shot bet that we'd have the next Terrell Davis, it's low odds. Okay. But like I could invest 100 and make 100,000, that would be the guy I would put it on, because Kennedy Brooks is that smart of a runner, and his contact balance and movement skills are just fantastic in terms of efficiency and understanding of the position.
Muhammad wants to know, super quick, Bloom, just because the Atlanta thing is weird.
Yeah.
I've been writing a lot in our newswire, and our newsletter's back. We take a couple months off, and then we start sending newsletter every day with the hottest news around the league. It's our footballguys.com newsletter. Sign up for free at footballguys.com. And I think the last 2 days I've done like 3 stories on Tyler Algier with Atlanta, because there's even one out where people were speculating like he might be the starter. Okay, well, Cordell's still there.
Yeah.
But it is a question we got from our guy Muhammad, so I figured we'd answer it.
Yeah, and I'll tease one up for Matt Waldman too. I'll just put it this way, okay? You have Hall and Walker. I would actually put it Walker and Hall. You have Cook, who I think should be broken out in his own tier as not quite on the Hall Walker level, just because of the draft capital and that he could be part of a tandem backfield more than those two guys. And then there's this group of 3rd, 4th, 5th round running backs that have various levels of compelling talent or situations. And that would be Dameon Pierce, Isaiah Spiller, Rashad White, Zamir White, Brian Robinson, probably Ty Davis Price, and Algier. And yes, Algier had the lowest draft capital of those guys, but he's also the only one where one of his main competition for a roster spot and got released right after the draft, which is, now we'll see whether they're right, but obviously the Falcons think Algier can step in and be the 1A with Patterson. So throwing all those guys in a hat, unless you really love one of those talents, if you can get Algier, who in rookie rankings is usually the last or next to last out of that tier, and the same thing goes for Davis Price, why not? I mean, this is just like those 5 receivers, London and Olave and Williams and Wilson and Burks. If you just get the 4th or 5th one of them, you probably did well, because they're close enough in value that getting that discount's enough. So Algier, we know we're going to get to see him. We know the team believes in him. That's enough, even if he isn't a flashy talent like some of the other backs that are going to go ahead of him.
Matt, super quick, Dameon Pierce. And let's just say I'll be all over the news for Houston, so we'll keep an inside track on that. But Pierce there, thoughts on him and his landing spot with the Texans?
Very good. Oh. I think that Marlon Mack has to prove that he's not damaged goods. And I think that over the long haul, teams have, started to soften a little bit on the whole Achilles thing. They've started to see maybe advancements in the surgery or rehab that have made it good. But Pierce is a better receiver. He is a more rugged runner. He's there's only 2 backs out of 500 that I've ever graded who couldn't win a collision with a linebacker coming downhill and had starter production. And Marlon Mack was one of those players. So he's very exceptional in terms of having a bad characteristic that hasn't worked well for running backs in my 17 years of study. Pierce can definitely run over a guy. And sometimes you just have to hope that he stops running when his helmet comes off. But he's that intense of a guy. So I like the fit there. He's going to be a top 5 option for me on my board at running back for this post draft for that reason. I'll just add quickly with Algier, they do have Damian Williams. So you get Damian Williams, you've got and what's interesting about Algier is that I thought he was a better gap runner when you project to the NFL than zone runner, because he has a real issue with angles in terms of tracking them, both as pass protection and running the ball. And I think what ends up happening there is that he would be better in gap where it's a more simple system to work through. And Atlanta runs more gap. So, but the problem is he doesn't have Williams' speed. He doesn't have the knowledge of angles and feel that Cordero Patterson has, and doesn't have that speed either. So it's possible, but I'd rather take a chance on guys like Zacondre White, Isaiah Pacheco, Brooks, Smith, and even Jerome Ford, who might wind up in Cleveland with a beautiful offensive line and could be one catastrophic injury away in 2023 from being the man there.
Oh, Ford is in a great spot. By the way, Zamir White is there in that spot as well with the Raiders.
I want to just, for people doing rookie drafts, since I've got the Matt Waldman here, I'm going to ask you just a real quick question and tee this up, Matt. Because the problem with these 3rd, 4th, 5th round running backs is they have a situation that gives them opportunity now, but next year a team's going to go back to the well, right? Like we saw this with Zach Moss, et cetera, et cetera. So out of Pierce, Spiller, the 2 Whites, Rashad and Zamir, Brian Robinson, Tyler Algier, and Ty Davis Price, do any of them, and if so, which ones, have the potential to make their team say, you know what? We don't need to go back to the well next year.
Yeah, Spiller and Pierce. I think those two are Spiller has the line, Pierce has the all-around skills. And I think they're the ones that I feel most comfortable with. White isn't far behind that.
Which one?
Which
Zamir.
White? Zamir. Rashad, I don't like. In fact, I need to go back and look.
Rashad's a space guy. Zamir can do everything.
Yeah, Rashad to me is too up and down. He's unproven to the level of skills that you look for the NFL. I'd rather take a shot on Ty Davis Price and Keontae Ingram than I would Rashad White. And here's the other thing about Rashad White. I'll say real quick. They run. First of all, you're dissing Leonard Fournette too much. Not you guys, but people overall in fantasy. The guy literally was running back 6 in 14 games last year and caught 69 balls, okay? And ran basically Jones off of that team. Kept Bernard on the bench, who was dominating training camp last year in the red zone. They used him a ton. John Ledyard reported on that daily. On top of that, he's a better tight crease runner than you realize. And the Buccaneers run a lot of duo, which is a tight crease scheme. Rashad White is not a good tight crease runner. He's not good when he's in an open crease and it gets filled. So for me, he has work to do. He's a year or two away, probably. He's closer to a bad Miles Sanders than he is to being like a better Ronald Jones. And that's, to me, that's an overvalued player right there in our draft, that if people are drafting him or someone wants him, you can trade back or whatever to let someone take that bait, go for it, because I'm not believing it.
And that is a wrap. By the way, do you know how this is how good Dameon Pierce is? When I was at the Senior Bowl and thousands of media are there to take selfies, instead of actually work or take notes or watch practice or pay attention. Pierce was the player where even the people that didn't pay attention were like, It's like, I guess it has to be completely obvious for people to be like, Mo, I'm in Alabama, everybody. My brand is in Alabama at the Senior Bowl. And what is the meme? Guy leaning around the tree, right? Mm-hmm. Jim Nagy and the scene in Mobile, they're just like, that's right. Go buy tourism. Go get that money. Nagy does a fine job. I mean, my God, what was it like? 83% of Senior Bowl players were drafted this year. Best, highest rate. Yeah. And, 107 of them or whatever it was. So, obviously Jim doing a great job there. And, well, our friend Eric Galco is doing a great job with the Shrine Bowl as well. It's a little less touristy. Anyway, that's me. I'm Cecil Lammey. There is Sigmund Bloom and then Matt Waldman doing good things. Matt, what's coming up with the RSP, man?
Post-draft should be out no later than tomorrow night. My rankings are close to set, and I just have some write-ups of good fit, bad fit, things like that we've talked about right here. I got to write all that stuff down and more. And then it should be ready for download. Then you can get it at mattwaldman.com. And of course, the newsletter and the projections and rankings will be coming out in June.
Sigmund Bloom, what do we got going on at footballguys.com? No, seriously.
What do we not have going on?
Camp. What do we have?
What do we not have going on? Look, rankings are up. Jason Wood has his projections up. We're going to be rolling out our team and play pages to get you reoriented to this season. We've got roundtables going on right now where we're weighing in on our favorites. Of course, we're going to have our draft series, our annual. It's where it all started, baby. So the juices are flowing now. We have more than enough to think about and process as OTA start to happen as we get closer to camp. Next thing you know, it's going to be week 1.
Next thing you know, we're going to be in it again. It is the Audible Ride Those Waves. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman. We thank you all very much. Can't do it without you. And we appreciate you guys doing all those YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. For the great Sigmund Bloom and the fantastic Matt Waldman, I'm Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.
The duck rolls up.